What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. This is TWA Motorsports, and today we are starting right back on the Trans Am where we left off. So in the last video, we got all the front drive accessories in. We got the belt on, power steering pump, AC pump, and we got the headers on. So I did not tighten up the headers, so that is what I'm going to start with today. And pretty much the way those headers tighten down is you start in the center and you kind of work your way out to the outside. And obviously we're going to do that on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and run those down to where they are snug with a ratcheting wrench. And then once we get to that, we will torque them. Once we torque those, we're going to move on to some other stuff. So my goal in this video, guys, is to get every single thing that I have laying here in the floor back in the car, with the exception of probably the sway bar because I'm going to repaint it. But everything, transmission, all the stuff that you see here in the floor, and there's some odds and end pieces that I'm not going to be using. I just had those out. But that is the goal today, as well as some other stuff like I said. But let's go get the wrench and get started on those headers. Now, once the headers are snugged down, like I said, you're working your way from the center out, we are going to go ahead and start to torque those. Now, they get torqued to 11 foot-pounds the first pass, and then 18 the second pass. So same way, same method, we're going to start in the center and work our way out, doing 11 first and then 18. Now that the header bolts are all tightened up, I'm going to go ahead and put these spark plugs in. And I am reusing the ones that I had before because they were only in maybe 1,000 miles and they are still looking absolutely great. So I generally thread these in by hand and then go back and tighten them up. Once we have all the spark plugs in place, we're going to go ahead and grab our steering shaft and put it into place. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put the 11 millimeter in the bottom, but I'll probably lift it up to tighten it up. But the top one I can go ahead and tighten up once I get it into place. Now, I do like to put a little bit of Loctite on these, and they get ran down and torqued to 35 foot-pounds. So, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and do this top one, but the bottom one I will do when I get the car up in the air. But for now, let's go ahead and get this one into place, get it torqued down to 35 foot-pounds, and then we'll move on to something else. Now, I do like to put a little bit of Loctite on these, and they get ran down and torqued to 35 foot-pounds. So, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and do this top one, but the bottom one I will do when I get the car up in the air. But for now, let's go ahead and get this one into place, get it torqued down to 35 foot-pounds, and then we'll move on to something else. Now, once we have that steering shaft tightened down, I'm going to go ahead and put the coil pack in on this side. And really this just, and I do just have the steering column torqued down on the top side, guys. Don't forget the bottom side. But now we're going to go ahead and slide this into place. I did clean it up a little bit. It was kind of grody looking. These are just 10 millimeter studs that go into place. And they kind of just fall in as far as where they sit. Go ahead and get these all in, and then we'll tighten this down. Like I said, it is 10 millimeters, so not a whole lot to tighten this down. Once we get this tightened down, we'll go ahead and put the plug wires in on this side, and I'm going to go ahead and hook the fuel line up on this side. Now I have all the plug wires here. We're going to go ahead and put those into place. I do like to use the metal boot that came on the bottom. Just something I do like to use. Back in the day I used to throw those away, but now I feel like they're kind of important to keep things from getting too hot. So now I've grabbed that section of fuel line. I'm going to go ahead and uncap the lines that I capped to keep junk from getting in them. And we're going to snap this into place. So it's pretty self-explanatory, guys. It just literally snaps on both pieces. And then there's a little keeper that goes on, and I do like to use those. Some people don't reuse them. I do think it's a good idea. Same thing up top here. It's kind of close with the coil pack. Man, really close. Some people don't reuse this evap line either, but once we get that on, same thing here. There's another clip. The next thing we're going to do is hook up the throttle lines. So they clip in this clip here. And this one actually goes back behind the master. He comes in. Same thing, it clips in this little clip. And we could go ahead and hook them both up. This just snaps on the end. That's the cruise control box. And then this one obviously is your throttle. You have to open the throttle body. And put it in. Now that that coil pack's on, the throttle cables are hooked up, we need to go to this other side and do the same thing, essentially putting the coil packs on. But we need to block off this back port on the actual valve cover, and it comes with a vacuum cap to do that. So we just need to slide that into place because we are no longer going to be using, oh, there goes my watch. We're no longer going to be using that connection, so it needs to be capped off. So I've got the cap on. Now we can go ahead and put the coil pack that I've got over there into place. Now I will tell you guys, I do like to go ahead and put at least the 2 back spark plugs into place, or plug wires, I'm sorry, because it is so hard to reach back in there that you're going to have issues trying to reach that and plug that all in. But if you go ahead and put the plug wire onto the plug on those back 2 cylinders, it's real easy to put your hand up in there and push it onto the coil pack. So you guys are probably wondering, did I cheat and not put the 10mm in the coil pack bracket in the very back? You're absolutely right, I did, because there is no reason to put that in there, and it is incredibly hard to get to. So if you do not want to put the very rear one in, don't. 4-hold it, isn't going anywhere. So let's go ahead and hook the 2 back plug wires up. As you can see, like I said, I put them in before I put the coil packs into place. Then we'll go ahead and put the front 2 in. Now that we got all the plug wires hooked up, let's go ahead and hook the coil pack up. Put the lock in. And guys, we are getting ever so closer, right? Now I think the next step is I'm going to lift up the car. We'll go ahead and get the transmission dipstick. Actually, I take that back. We're going to try to get the oil pan dipstick into place. And if you guys remember, I put a plug in there, so I'm going to have to lift it up real quick, get the plug out that I put in there, and then we'll thread it into place and bolt it down. It's just a 15mm. I went ahead and got that plug out of the oil pan, so now we're ready to thread this into place. And you may have to move it around. You can generally see down there where it goes into the pan, so just try to line it up. Once you get it into place, then you can go ahead and bolt it down. You need to put the 15mm bolt into the head. I may have to undo this plug wire for just a minute while I put it into place. And then I just tighten it up snug with a ratcheting wrench. So I've got this thing up in the air now, and I went ahead and torqued down that other steering shaft bolt to 35 foot-pounds. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the transmission lines into place. So these guys kind of route up against the motor, and to me it's the easiest way to use this because these hard lines kind of keep things out of the heat. So I'm going to go ahead and thread those into place. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the transmission dipstick tube in. So this is one of those things I probably should have put in before I put the headers on, but I can sneak it in from the bottom side without the transmission in, but it definitely needs to be into place. And I'm just going to run the bolt into the motor for now, and we may have to take that out when we go to put the transmission into place, but that actually has to go in before the transmission. You're not going to be able to sneak that in afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead and get those two things into place, and then we're probably going to set it down and go ahead and get the coolant overflow tank in. So as you can see, I've got those into place. There's a little clip here on, I don't know if you guys can see that, a clip here that it goes in, and then obviously we're going to have to run the bolt, the 15mm back off of the alternator in order to put this bracket into place. But those lines are in place, so I'm going to go ahead and go grab the dipstick tube and see if we can get it into place. So guys, I had a time getting the dipstick tube into place. It's just it's one of those things that needed to go on a little earlier in the process, but I did get it in. And so what I did was I ran it up from the bottom side. I did put a little scratch on the bottom side of the cowl, which I didn't really paint that anyway, so it's not a big deal, but it is in place now. It is not where it needs to go. Obviously, it needs to come here. But for now, until I get it in the transmission, I'm not even going to bolt it down. I'm just going to leave it where it's at. So now let's go ahead and move on to putting our coolant overflow into place, which goes right here. So I'm going to go grab it and the bolt, and we'll bolt it down. So I've got the coolant overflow ready to go in place here, and all it does is bolts in with the 15mm. There's just one bolt that holds it into place. Not really a whole lot to it, guys. I may end up taking this out to trim on this, depending on what kind of battery I think I'm going to run. As of right now, I'm going to run a different battery than what it had before, and so I may end up having to change some stuff around. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down. And then you do have a couple things that, there's a push pin that actually goes here in the side. I'm going to go ahead and put that into place. But other than that, I'm going to lift it back up, and we're about ready for the transmission. Well guys, it's been a couple days, so, well, I guess you're really not going to notice because it's all in the same video, but I'm ready to put the transmission into place. Now, instead of using my jack like I did before, my neighbor actually has a transmission jack, which is awesome because I've been wanting to use that to put it, I wish I'd have had it to take it out, to be quite honest with you, but it's going to make things a lot easier. But the first couple things that we need to do is we're going to go ahead and put the clips into place where you lock these in, and they're just almost like a windshield crank clip that go, well, right here on this, and I will show you that here in just one second. And besides that, the only other things that I want to do, obviously before I put it in, is we're going to have to put the torque converter in, which I will also show you. And I do need to go ahead and get the flywheel holding tool out of the way. I have had that in there obviously to tighten up not only the flywheel itself, but the front balancer. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a 17, get that out of the way, and then we'll get the transmission all ready to go. So to put these clips on, you can see what they look like. Literally, you just have to, hopefully I can do this with one hand, guys. Snap them into place, and believe me, it's much easier to put them on now than while they're in the car. So make sure that you do this before you put the transmission in the car. Now I know I talked about going with a different transmission, but for now I'm going to use the 60 because it's still in good shape, and well, to be quite honest with you, there's a ton of stuff that goes along with swapping to an 80, and it will happen down the road, but for now we're going to use the 60. But I'm going to get these clips into place, then I'm going to get it up on the transmission jack, and we'll put the converter in and we'll be ready to go. So we've got it up on the stand or the jack, and we're ready to put the converter in. So basically you're just sliding this into place, and it was already previously filled, but you're going to listen for 3 clicks. I got one there. There's the second one, and there is the third one. So listen in for 3 clicks. Oh, so sorry, that was the third one. You want to make sure that it is seated all the way. Otherwise, if you don't, when you put it into the car, you're going to smash the pump, and which ruins everything. You're going to have to take it all back out. So you can spin it back and forth a couple times if you don't feel comfortable, making sure that it's all the way seated. But we are in now, and we're ready to get it under the car and get it into place. Now we've got the jack under the car, and one thing you guys need to take note of is that while you're going into place, you need to line up your dipstick tube. You will not be able to get it into place if you get it all the way up there, bolted on, and then try to put it in afterwards. It actually has to snake right down here. The other thing you need to make sure of is you're not going to pinch any wires. So I've got my wires on the back side of the actual transmission dipstick tube. So we're going to go ahead and start to hoist it into place. Now, once you get the transmission where it needs to be and the dipstick lined up, I went ahead and put loosely 2 of these bottom bolts into place. Now, once I get those 2, I'm going to go and put the 2 right above it and go ahead and snug them down. I'm not going to torque them yet, and we should be good. Now, a couple things you want to watch for is there's 2 dowel pins that you want to make sure are aligned up top. Make sure you're not bending or moving those around. And other than that, it's just putting the bolts in at this point. Once I get these bottom 4 in, then I'll go ahead and get the transmission jack out of the way, because that'll be enough to hold it into place. Now have the transmission jack out of place, and the transmission is bolted up, at least with the, I was able to get 5 of them in. I probably could get a couple more in, but once you get the transmission jack out of the way, the motor should dangle down enough to get the top 12 o'clock position in, and there's not one in the 1 o'clock position, but there is one in the 11 o'clock position. So I've only got, I think 2 or 3 left to put in. So not a big deal. I'm going to go ahead and thread those in. Now you are going to have to use a pretty long extension in order to tighten those top ones. That's pretty common in these cars. But once we get all of those tightened, then we'll talk about the torque specs. And then we don't want to leave a ton of pressure on those motor mounts. So we're going to go ahead and for now get this into place. I am going to be replacing this, but for now I want to get the pressure off of the motor mount. So I'm just going to slide that in and get it, like I said, get the pressure off of it. Now I do have everything tight all the way up to the top. I was able to put my hand in on this side, even with the header in place, and start that one. And then I just used a swivel and a long extension. You can see part of my extension here, but we're ready to torque these down. Now they only go to 35 foot-pounds, so it's not gonna take me long. I'm not gonna show you guys that, but after we get those torqued, then we'll talk about putting these transmission lines into place, and they are very simple. They're literally gonna snap into place, and then we'll talk about the dipstick tube, which, like I said, hopefully you guys lined up while you were putting the transmission into place. It is in the spot. All I have to do is pull it down, and there is a bolt that goes on the back of the head that keeps it in place. Now, once we get all of that complete, then we can move the wiring kind of into place, and then we can, like I said, get this transmission cross member into place. Now, if you're reusing your stock torque arm, which mine's still in place, but I did not put the bolts in the back that keep the torque arm in place, and there's a good reason for that, and you guys will see in a future video. But obviously I'm not going to be reusing the stock torque arm, but for now, let's go ahead, I'll torque those down, and then we'll come back, I'll talk about those transmission lines. Now that we have the transmission lines, or sorry, the transmission all torqued down, all we have to do is push these into place. So you'll hear them snap. I say that. There's one. This one's got transmission fluid on it, so it's kind of slick. I'm gonna have to use a bar to push that in, but that is all we have to do there. And then, like I said, we'll go ahead and see if we can get the dipstick tube down into place and get the wires routed. Now, I did have my son come out and help me push this. Hopefully you guys can see into place the transmission dipstick tube. It just needs to be pushed at the top while somebody kind of moves it around on the bottom in order to get into place. Now, it's going to be almost impossible for you guys, even with a light, for you to see what's next, but the transmission dipstick tube does bolt to the back of the head, and so I'm going to go ahead and put that into place. And then there is a clip for all the wiring that goes to your transmission on the side of the dipstick tube. So I'm going to go ahead and put that into place too, and then we'll get all our wires back here on top of the transmission. Now, once we get the dipstick into place, which was pretty tough, guys. Honestly, I had to wrestle around with it for a little bit. We're gonna go ahead and start plugging stuff in. Now, your main plug is here. You may have to fiddle around with it a little too. You don't want to break anything. And then once we get that into place and plugged in, you have your rear O2 sensors, which we will not be using, and then just your speed sensor, which goes in the back of the transmission here. Now, all of that stuff clips into this clip. So I'm gonna go ahead and get it into that clip, and then we'll move to the other side and see if we can get the actual shifter hooked up. All the lines plugged in, we're moving over here to the other side for the shift selector, and I've got that into place. Now all we need to do is pop this ball socket on, and then obviously bolt these down. And I'm going to retorque the pan when I do this. So for now, I'm gonna have to move this back or get in the car. We'll just move it back from here and snap this on. And this needs to be cleaned up a little. I'll probably go back and clean this. I don't know that I can do this with one hand, guys. So anyway, you see how it goes. I'm gonna get it into place and then bolt this back up. Well, now that I have that finished up, I think the last thing I'm going to do is put the transmission bolt or transmission cross member back into place. At least the last thing I think I'm going to do for today. But I'm going to grab that 18mm that just keeps this into place, and then I'm just going to use my shoulder. I think I can get it up high enough to get those started and back into place. But like I said, I don't want to put a ton of pressure on those new motor mounts. Well, guys, I decided why make it harder on yourself when the transmission jack is still over here. So I just put the transmission jack back into place and lifted this up because it needed to move over just a little bit. So I was trying to move it and do this at the same time. Just wasn't working out. So we're gonna go ahead, get these bolts into place, and probably just cinch them down for now. I'm not gonna torque them yet. And once we do that, I think we'll be finished for today. So that is all we are going to be doing for today, guys. Now, I know it seems like we are getting closer, but we still have a lot to do. We still, and we are getting closer, but there's still quite a bit of stuff to get accomplished. Now, if you notice, I did move a few things up here. I moved the drive shaft. We're not ready to put it in yet because I'm going to be doing something in the rear end, and that doesn't need to go in yet. And also, I haven't put the radiator and the AC piece in here. Other than that, all the stuff that's on this is either extra or it's required for the AC. The sway bar, like I said, I did go ahead and paint it, so it is finished up, and I just sprayed it with some Rust-Oleum. The intake that you see sitting here is actually the stock LS3 intake for my wife's car, so obviously we're starting to collect parts for that. I picked that up on Facebook Marketplace, but we still have a lot of wiring to go. We have a whole bunch of stuff planned for the rear of this car. So the goal was to get everything wrapped up on the front, and once we get that finished, then I'm going to get it off of the lift, and you'll kind of see in upcoming videos what's going on in the rear of the vehicle. But guys, hopefully you're enjoying this build. I know that I'm getting excited to get it closer and closer to finished. I'm ready to drive this thing, and I think it's going to be almost a year being apart. Now, would it take this long if I were working on it every night? No, it wouldn't, but I like to take my time, and I'm not in a huge hurry. Now, I am starting to want to do other things that are bigger projects, so in order to do that, obviously I gotta get this done. But if you're enjoying this, guys, please smash that thumbs up button. Like always, if you're not subscribed, go down and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there, make sure you ring that bell icon. That way you're notified every single time we drop a new video. And well, stay tuned to see what we work on next.